What if everything you believed about loss was a lie? Stay with us until the end. This story will shake you. Don't forget to like, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe so you never miss the next one. The rain fell steadily over Boston's Memorial Garden, drumming softly on umbrellas and soaking the marble stones that bore the names of the lost. A cluster of mourners lingered near one of the monuments, but at the center of it all stood Thomas Becket. His face was lined with exhaustion, his shoulders stiff beneath the weight of a black overcoat. It had been 1 year since his wife, Elena, was declared dead, swept into the ocean during a storm. Friends, colleagues, and members of the press had gathered to mark the anniversary. They whispered condolences and touched his arm, but their words dissolved into the drizzle, empty as the gray sky above. Thomas set a bouquet of roses on the stone and lowered his head. His chest felt hollow. Every attempt to move forward had been a performance, every smile a mask. Inside, the grief clung to him like the rain-soaked fabric on his shoulders. He thought he had learned to live with it, until a voice pierced the murmur of umbrellas and rain. "Your wife is still alive." The words froze him where he stood. Slowly, he turned. Standing just beyond the circle of mourners was a girl. She was young, 10, maybe 11, with dark skin and wide, serious eyes. Her hoodie clung to her thin frame, drenched by the storm. Despite her small size, her presence cut through the garden like a blade. "What did you say?" Thomas asked, his voice low and careful. The girl stepped forward. "I saw her. Your wife. She's not dead." An uneasy laugh slipped from one of his assistants. "Let's get Mr. Becket out of the rain." "Quiet," Thomas snapped, never taking his eyes off the girl. He studied her face, the certainty in her gaze, the tremor in her voice that sounded less like fear and more like urgency. "I was there the night she came out of the water," the girl continued. "She was bleeding, scared." They dragged her into a van. Thomas's jaw tightened. His throat ached with the effort to dismiss her words, yet something inside him resisted. "Little girl, my wife drowned in a storm off the coast." "There were no survivors. We searched for weeks." "She survived," the girl insisted, her voice sharp now. "I remember her." Thomas folded his arms. "And what makes you so sure it was her?" "She had a scar," the girl said firmly. She lifted her sleeve and traced a line down her left arm from elbow to wrist. "Here." A long scar. She had short, platinum blonde hair, and she kept yelling your name. The world tilted. Elena had gotten that scar in college when a pane of glass shattered during a student protest. She never spoke of it, and after chemotherapy, she wore her hair short, proud and defiant. No reporter could have known that. No stranger could have guessed. Still, Thomas fought against the hope clawing at his chest. "That's not possible." "Yes, it is," the girl snapped. "They didn't let her go." A man told them to drag her. He had a fake arm, a plastic one. He was in charge. Thomas inhaled sharply. What did this man look like? White, tall, gray beard, wore a long coat. He barked orders like he was in the army. He said, "Move her before anyone sees." Her voice shook now, but her eyes never left his. "Your wife looked right at me." Her eyes were full of fear, but also like she knew I could help. Rain ran down Thomas's face, or maybe they were tears. He wanted to scream at her to stop torturing him with hope, but something inside him was listening. "She wore a necklace," the girl said softly now. "Gold, with a heart, 2 letters on it, E and B." Thomas's pulse hammered. That pendant had been his 10th anniversary gift to Elena, custom made. She had never taken it off. He had never told anyone about it, not the press, not his staff. "Where did you get this?" he demanded, his voice breaking as the girl reached into her hoodie pocket. From the folds, she pulled out a small handkerchief, frayed and rain-soaked, trimmed with lace. One word, sewn in gold thread, was still legible. Elena. The air rushed from his lungs. He stepped toward her slowly, as if afraid she might vanish. "Where did you get this?" "Behind the old cannery," she said. "They stopped the van there that night. I watched from behind the fence, the world around Thomas blurred. Mourners, umbrellas, the press, all of it faded into the mist. Only the girl remained, holding a piece of his wife's life in her small hands. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Maya," she replied. "And why are you telling me this now?" "Because no one else listened," Maya said. "I tried. I told a cop once. He laughed, told me to stop making up stories. But it wasn't a story. I saw everything." Thomas searched her eyes. They were too clear, her words too precise. He saw no trick, no manipulation, only pain and truth. Behind him, an aide muttered, "Sir, reporters are starting to move in." But Thomas didn't move. He looked at the handkerchief in his palm, the golden thread catching the dim light. Memories surged. Elena laughing on their yacht, reading in the mornings, brushing her hair short after treatment, the scar she hid every summer. "You're serious?" he whispered. "Dead serious," Maya answered. Thomas turned to his assistant. "Get the car. Now." When the black sedan pulled up, he opened the door and motioned for Maya to climb in. Her eyes widened. "Really?" she asked. "If what you're saying is true," Thomas said, "I need your help to bring her back." She climbed in beside him. As the car pulled away from the memorial, a man in a gray raincoat lowered a pair of binoculars on the far side of the garden. He tapped a small device hidden in his pocket. "They've made contact," he said into an earpiece. "Proceed to step 2. Inside the warm car, Thomas clutched the handkerchief tightly, as if it anchored him to something he had thought was lost forever. For the first time in a year, he dared to believe again, and that terrified him more than anything. The silence in the car was heavy. Rain tapped against the glass, rolling in streaks like slow tears. Maya sat quietly, her eyes on the blurred city lights outside the window. Finally, Thomas broke the silence. "Maya, where exactly did you see them take her?" "Down by the docks," she said without turning. "Behind the old cannery on Pier 14 up there. There's a chain-link fence with a hole in it. I hide there sometimes." Thomas leaned back, his mind racing through the fog of memory. "And this man with the artificial arm, you're sure?" "Yes," she said firmly. His left arm made a weird clicking sound when he moved it. It was white, like plastic, looked military. Thomas nodded slowly. That detail burrowed into his thoughts. He had once negotiated with a defense contractor experimenting with advanced prosthetics. He thought the project had failed. Perhaps he had been wrong. "You said she looked scared?" he asked quietly. "She was screaming," Maya said, finally meeting his eyes. "Not loud, more like begging. She tried to get away. That's when they grabbed her." Thomas's chest tightened. He stared at her. "And no one else saw this but you?" Maya's face hardened. "People don't look at kids like me, especially not a black girl sleeping near dumpsters." The honesty struck him harder than the storm. He hadn't thought about how invisible she must have been in the city he ruled from boardrooms and penthouses. That same city had let his wife vanish and let Maya witness it unseen. "Why did you wait a year to come to me?" he asked. "I didn't know who you were at first," she admitted. "Not until I saw a picture of you in a magazine at the library. It said you were giving a speech today. That's when I knew." Thomas rubbed his temples. Rain ticked against the roof like clock hands counting down. He looked at her again. Wet shoes, thin hands curled in her lap, jaw set with more resolve than most adults he knew. "Do you have anywhere to go tonight?" She shook her head. "Then you'll stay at my house," he said. "At least until we sort this out." Her eyebrows lifted. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he replied. "You brought me something no one else could, hope." As the car curved toward the hills, where his estate overlooked the ocean, Thomas pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in a year. It rang twice before a gravelly voice answered. "Beckett." "You told me you were done." "I was," Thomas said. "Until 10 minutes ago. Now I need surveillance on Pier 14. Watch for anyone with an artificial arm. Medical personnel. Military contractors. Anything unusual?" A pause. Then, "What the hell did you just step into?" "Something I buried a year ago," Thomas said, staring at the handkerchief. "And it's clawing its way back." He ended the call and turned to Maya. "We'll start with your story." "Every detail. Nothing's too small." Maya hesitated. "Do you believe me now?" "I believe enough to put people on the ground," he said, and that meant everything. The night air carried the sharp tang of salt and rust as Thomas Beckett's black SUV rolled silently through the streets toward the waterfront. Beside him, Maya sat hunched in her new hoodie, the one his housekeeper had given her earlier, though her shoes were still damp from the rain. Her hands rested on her knees, tense, but her eyes stayed fixed on the road ahead. Ree Carter, his longtime security chief and the only man Thomas trusted without hesitation, drove in silence. When the SUV slowed, the glow of the docks spread out before them. Piers stretched like blackened fingers into the water. The old cannery loomed ahead, an abandoned warehouse with broken windows and a rusting sign that still faintly read, "New England Seafood Company." It looked dead, but Thomas had lived too long in the corporate underworld to believe in dead buildings. Maya pointed through the windshield with a trembling finger. "There. That's where they stopped. That's where I hid." Behind that dumpster by the fence, the SUV idled a moment longer before Thomas gave the order. "Ree, sweep it." Ree nodded once. "Stay here," he told Maya. She looked ready to protest, but Thomas's firm gaze kept her quiet. "This isn't a game," he added. "We'll be quick." Thomas and Ree moved across the wet asphalt, their footsteps muffled by the mist. The cannery's front doors were chained shut, but the side entrance showed newer signs of use. The lock was shiny, not corroded like the rest of the building. Ree picked it swiftly, and the door groaned open into darkness. Inside, the smell hit them first: salt, mildew, and something chemical. Bleach. They moved cautiously down the main hall, their flashlights slicing through the shadows. Most of the rooms were gutted, filled with broken machinery and collapsed crates. But at the far end of a corridor, a newly fitted padlock blocked a heavy door. Ree snapped it open. The hinges shrieked as the door swung inward. The room was small, barely the size of a hospital ward, and the stench changed here. Metallic, sharp, unmistakable. Blood. In the center stood a rusted cot, its legs bolted to the floor. Leather restraints dangled from each corner. On a tray beside it lay an empty syringe and a length of tubing. Thomas's stomach clenched. He stepped closer, scanning the walls. That was when he saw it. Carved faintly into the concrete. Shaky, but legible, 2 letters. E.B. "Elena Beckett," Ree muttered. Thomas pressed his hand against the letters. The grooves were fresh, no more than weeks old. His wife had been here. He could almost see her, desperate and defiant, scratching her name into the wall as proof she existed. "She left a sign," Thomas whispered. His throat was tight. "She knew someone would come." Ree crouched and held up a scrap of cloth from the floor. It was dark with dried blood, embroidered in silver thread. "Looks like it tore from a scarf," he said. Thomas's fingers shook as he took it. It's hers. I bought this for her in Paris. The weight of the evidence pressed on him like a tidal wave. She had lived, she had fought, and she had been here, held in this room like a prisoner. They searched further. The dust in the room was disturbed, footprints scattered across the concrete. More than one set of boots had been there recently. Someone had been guarding the place. Someone had moved her. Thomas's pulse pounded in his ears. If they had moved her once, they would move her again. He had been too late tonight, but he would not be too late again. When they returned to the SUV, Maya sat curled in the back seat, her knees to her chest. She looked up, eyes wide. "Well?" Thomas slid into the seat beside her, his jaw hard, but his eyes softer. "You were right." A flicker of pride passed across her face, though it was shadowed by sorrow. "She was scared, wasn't she?" He nodded once. "Very." Maya stared at her shoes. "I don't understand why someone would take her." "She's just a lady." Thomas turned his gaze out the window, rain streaking down the glass. "She's not just a lady. She's my wife. And sometimes when people can't control a man, they go after what he loves most." The words hung in the air, heavy and unshakable. Ree cleared his throat. "There's more, Tom. Whoever runs this isn't just some street thug, military precision. Private contractors, maybe. The padlock was new, the restraints professional. This is organized." Thomas leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Then we treat it as organized. And we fight it as organized." Maya hugged herself tighter. "They'll come after you, won't they?" "They already have," Thomas said, "but now we know the truth. And that means they're afraid." The SUV pulled away from the cannery, headlights cutting through the fog. The city stretched out ahead, a maze of secrets and shadows. Back at the estate, Maya ate quietly at the long dining table, her fingers tight around a grilled cheese sandwich. She chewed carefully, as if afraid the food would vanish if she moved too quickly. Thomas sat across from her, watching. "What about school?" he asked. "I go sometimes," she said with a shrug, "when the shelters make me, but mostly I don't." Thomas leaned forward. "What would you say if I told you this, what you saw tonight, might help me find my wife? And if it does, I'll make sure you never have to sleep under a pier again." Maya's eyes lifted, suspicious, searching. "You'd really do that?" "I don't make promises I won't keep." She studied him for a long moment, then gave a small nod. "Then I'll tell you everything." And she did. She described the van, the men in black clothing, the sound of the prosthetic arm clicking when the leader gestured. She even told him about something one of the men had dropped, a small black box with strange writing on it. She had hidden it behind the fence, too afraid to show anyone. Thomas listened to every word, his mind absorbing the details, building a picture. Each fragment was a thread. Each thread could lead him closer. Later, when Maya finally fell asleep on the leather couch in his study, wrapped in a blanket, Thomas sat alone in his office. The scarf fragment lay on his desk beside the bloodied scrap. He turned it over in his hand again and again. His phone buzzed. Ree's voice crackled through the line. "We have movement. Unregistered vehicles at the cannery. Guards, no logos." And one man, matching the prosthetic description, Thomas's hand tightened around the cloth. His pulse surged. "Don't engage," he said. "Just track. I want to know where they go, who they report to. Understood." The call ended. The estate was silent except for the sound of rain against glass. Through the window, Thomas could see Maya curled up on the couch, her breathing steady. She had not lied. He could feel it in his bones. Something dark had stolen his wife from the ocean. And now, because of a girl who had lived in the margins, unseen and unheard, he had a second chance to bring Elena back. The storm was no longer on the horizon. It was here. The storm had passed by morning, leaving Boston washed in pale sunlight and puddles that shimmered along the streets. At the Beckett estate, the air smelled of salt from the nearby cliffs. Inside, the atmosphere was heavier, weighted with revelation. Thomas Beckett had not slept. He sat at the long oak table in his study, the fragment of Elena's scarf laid carefully beside the blood-stained scrap Ree had recovered from the cannery. The initials scratched into the concrete wall haunted him more than any dream could have. Maya entered the room quietly, her new hoodie hanging loose on her shoulders, sleeves pulled low over her hands. She hesitated before speaking, as though she feared breaking the silence. "I told you everything I remember," she said softly. Thomas lifted his eyes to her. "And you did well. But we need more than memory now." Ree Carter stepped in from the hall, his boots damp from an early reconnaissance. "The cannery is active again." Vehicles pulled in before dawn. Whoever's running this isn't finished there, but they know we're watching now. Thomas pinched the bridge of his nose. Then we moved to the next step. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to a number he had avoided for months. The line clicked and a gravelly voice answered. "Ray Miller," the man said. "Ray, it's Beckett." The pause that followed was long, uneasy. "Tom, I thought you buried that storm." "I did. But it didn't stay buried." Ray exhaled sharply. "This about Elena?" Thomas glanced at Maya, who lingered near the window. "Yes, and I need the truth. What happened out there, the night her yacht went down?" The voice on the other end was hesitant. "Tom, I can't." "You can," Thomas cut in, "and you will. I don't need rumors. I need facts." Another pause, then Ray said quietly, "Meet me at the marina in an hour." The marina lay on the edge of the city, a sprawl of weathered docks lined with boats of every size. The air was thick with the smell of diesel and seaweed. Thomas arrived with Maya and Ree, his black SUV drawn stairs from the fishermen hauling nets along the piers. At the far slip, an older man in a denim jacket leaned against a powerboat, cigar smoke curling from his mouth. His face was lined, his eyes wary. "Beckett," Ray greeted. "Ray," Thomas replied, extending a hand. "Thanks for meeting me." Ray's gaze slid to Maya. "This your kid?" "She's a witness," Thomas said. Ray studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You said this was about Elena. You sure you wanted to dig this up?" "I don't have a choice," Thomas said. "Tell me what happened that night." Ray took a long drag on his cigar before answering. "We logged a distress beacon. Unregistered. Strong signal, coming from just off Dead Man's Bluff. But before we could respond, Homeland called, ordered us to delete the report. Said it was a drill." Thomas's fists tightened. "And you just obeyed?" "I was ordered, Tom," Ray said grimly. "But I remember." The signal was real. Someone was out there. Maya stepped forward, her small voice steady. "It was her. I saw them pull her from the water." Ray blinked, surprised by her certainty. He looked from the girl to Thomas. "She's telling the truth?" "She has no reason to lie," Thomas said. Ray stubbed out his cigar. "Then listen." That night wasn't an accident. Something bigger was moving under those waves, ships that weren't supposed to be there. And your wife, she wasn't the target of the storm. She was silenced. Thomas's jaw clenched. He had suspected it, but hearing it aloud stripped away any remaining denial. "Silenced for what?" he asked. Ray hesitated, then lowered his voice. "She was working on something." "A lawsuit. I don't know the details, but word on the docks was that she had names, big names, shipping executives, men who use the ocean for more than cargo. She was close to making it public, and then the storm. Thomas's chest tightened. He remembered the nights Elena had spent at her desk, papers spread across the table, her voice sharp when she spoke of corruption and trafficking. He had assumed her passion was dangerous only in court. He had been wrong. "They didn't come after me," he said softly. "They came after her." Maya's eyes widened. "So this wasn't about you at all?" "No," Thomas said. "It was about silencing her." The drive back to the estate was tense. Maya sat in the back seat, staring at the map Ray had circled. Her small fingers traced the inked circle again and again. "Do you think they knew she'd survive?" she asked quietly. Thomas's gaze stayed fixed on the road. "I think they hoped she wouldn't. And when she did, they made sure she disappeared." By the time they reached the estate, night had fallen again. The iron gates closed behind them, but the air felt no safer. Inside the study, Thomas laid out the evidence on the table. The scarf, the photograph of the carved initials, the coordinates Ray had given him. It formed a grim puzzle. Ree leaned against the wall, arms folded. "If Elena was targeted, this goes higher than we thought. Private contractors, offshore accounts, maybe even federal cover. We'll be up against an entire system." Thomas nodded slowly. "Then we'll treat it as a system and break it piece by piece." Maya sat at the table, her eyes darting between the scraps of evidence. She looked smaller than ever, but her voice carried weight when she spoke. "If she was silenced because she knew the truth, then I have to help you bring it back. All of it." Thomas looked at her. In her eyes he saw something familiar, the same fire that had burned in Elena's eyes when she refused to back down no matter the cost. "You've already helped more than anyone else could," he said. "But if you're in this, you need to understand. It's dangerous. They'll come after us. They'll come after you." Maya's jaw tightened. "I'm not afraid." Ree's voice was steady. "She should be. We all should. These people don't make threats. They make corpses." Thomas gathered the evidence into a folder and locked it in a drawer. "Then we stay ahead of them. We find out who they are, who gave the orders, and why they wanted Elena gone. And we start now." As the house settled into uneasy silence, Thomas stood at the window overlooking the cliffs. The sea stretched out dark and endless, hiding secrets in its depths. Somewhere beyond the horizon, his wife's truth had been buried. But tonight, with Maya's testimony and Ray's confirmation, the burial shroud had begun to tear. He turned from the window and found Maya in the doorway, her eyes steady, her voice soft. "You believe me now, don't you?" Thomas nodded once. "I believe enough to fight, and that means everything." The storm wasn't past. It was only beginning. The Beckett estate, perched high on the cliffs above the Atlantic, was supposed to be a sanctuary. Yet, on the night after Thomas had met with Ray Miller, it felt more like a target painted in glass and stone. The wind rattled the windows, but inside, the silence pressed heavier than the storm outside. Thomas stood in his study, staring at the folder of evidence he had begun to piece together. Elena's scarf fragment, the photograph of the carved initials, the coordinates Ray had marked on a map. Each artifact was a thread, and together they wove a picture of something vast and merciless. Ree Carter entered quietly, his expression grim. "Tom, we have a problem." Thomas looked up. "What now?" "Someone was in your office last night, no forced entry. Whoever it was had the passcode." Thomas's jaw tightened. "An insider." Reese nodded. "I swept the security feeds." A gap, 30 minutes long. Cameras went black. "Someone with skill." Thomas pressed his palms flat on the desk. "They're watching us." From the hallway, Maya appeared, hugging herself against the chill. Her eyes were wide but not afraid, only sharper than they had been days ago. "They're scared," she said. "That's why they're watching us." "Because we know something now." Thomas looked at her. She was 15, small, and yet her words carried the weight of someone who had lived in shadows her entire life. "Scared people are dangerous," Ree said flatly. "Then so are we," Maya answered. Later that evening, they gathered in the dining room. The long table, once used for quiet dinners, was covered with files and digital printouts. Ree projected images onto a screen: offshore bank accounts, shell companies, private contractors with dissolved registrations. "This is bigger than we thought," Ree said. Elena wasn't just digging into one company. She was pulling on a thread tied to a network. It stretches across shipping firms, private security outfits, even medical contractors. And the name that keeps showing up, Ashmont Holdings. Thomas studied the screen. Ashmont? Delaware registration. But activity traces back to a supply depot near the docks. 2 miles from where Maya saw the van stop, Maya leaned forward, her small hand pressed against the table. "So, that's where she was taken? Or where she was held before they moved her again?" Ree replied. Thomas's voice hardened. "Then that's where we go." Maya's eyes narrowed. "What if it's a trap?" Thomas looked at her, then nodded. "Then we spring it first." The night of the break-in proved her words true. The estate alarm tripped just after midnight. Thomas rushed into the command room where monitors flickered with images from security cameras. 3 figures moved through the eastern perimeter, dressed in black, armed, precise. "They're testing the walls," Ree said, already strapping out the gear. Thomas clenched his jaw. "They want to make it look like a robbery." Or an accident. Maya appeared at the door, her hair mussed from sleep, but her eyes burning. "They're here for me too, aren't they?" Thomas turned sharply. "Stay in your room." She shook her head. "No, if they saw me that night, they won't stop until I'm gone too." Ree glanced at Thomas. "She's right. She's a witness, and they know it." Thomas hesitated, then handed Maya a small GPS beacon. "Wear this." "Always. If something happens, you run. Don't freeze. Run." "I'm tired of running," she whispered. The attackers never breached the house that night. They withdrew after tripping secondary alarms, leaving only scorch marks on the fence and a single bullet lodged in a garden wall. But the message was clear. The Beckett estate was no longer safe. The following morning, the tension inside the house was unbearable. Elena's files lay spread across the study, page after page of contracts, shipping manifests, and coded correspondence. Among them was a symbol, a black triangle over a white field. Maya traced it with her finger. "I saw this," she said suddenly. Thomas looked up sharply. "Where?" "On one of the crates they loaded into the van that night. It was dark, but I remember this shape." Ree leaned closer. "That symbol's not random. It's their mark." Thomas nodded grimly. "Then we finally have a name for what we're fighting. The Black Triangle." As night fell again, the estate transformed. Security drones hovered over the grounds, motion sensors lit the drive, and guards patrolled the perimeter. Inside, the house felt less like a home and more like a fortress. Maya sat in the study with Thomas, a sketchbook open on her lap. She wasn't drawing for comfort anymore. She was sketching the face of the man with the prosthetic arm. Each stroke of her pencil was sharp, deliberate, as though carving him into existence. Thomas watched her work. "You remember his face clearly?" "I'll never forget it," she said without looking up. "He's the reason she screamed." Thomas's throat tightened. He turned to the window, the ocean waves crashing against the cliffs below. His wife's voice still echoed in his memory. Her laugh, her determination, her warnings. Now, Maya's drawings made them real again. Re-entered, carrying a tablet. We traced Ashmont Holdings. They're linked to 3 offshore accounts that were dissolved right after Elena disappeared, but one is still active. Thomas stepped closer. Where? Reed tapped the screen. A warehouse near the old shipping yards. No company logos, no official records, but payments flow through it every week. Maya lifted her head. That's it? That's where they took her Hearst. Thomas felt a cold certainty settle over him. Then tomorrow night, we go. We'll confirm, we'll document, and if she's there, we bring her home. Maya's voice was quiet but firm. And if she's not? Thomas met her gaze. Then we keep searching. Until we find her. That night, long after the house had gone quiet, Thomas walked the halls alone. He stopped in the study where Maya's sketch of the man with the prosthetic arm lay on the desk. He stared at it, memorizing every line, every shadow. Then he looked down at the scarf fragment in his hand. The storm outside battered the windows, but he barely noticed. His mind was already at the warehouse, already preparing for what they might find. Behind him, Maya's voice came softly from the doorway. You believe she's still alive, don't you? Thomas turned slowly, meeting her eyes. Yes, he said, his voice steady, and tomorrow night we'll prove it. The black triangle had made their move. Now it was his turn. The following night came cloaked in fog, thick and heavy along the Boston waterfront. The Beckett SUV crawled down a narrow service road, headlights dimmed, the sound of its engine muted by the rolling mist. Thomas Beckett sat in the passenger seat, his jaw tight, eyes locked on the road ahead. Beside him, Ree Carter gripped the wheel with steady precision. In the back seat, Maya sat between them, her small frame swallowed by the dark hoodie Thomas had insisted she wear. She clutched the GPS tablet to her chest, her eyes focused, unblinking. They had one target, the Ashmont Holdings Depot, a corrugated steel warehouse pressed against the shoreline, 2 miles from Pier 14. On paper, it was inactive. In reality, it pulsed with guarded activity. As they crept closer, Thomas raised a pair of binoculars. Through the mist, the building revealed its secrets. 2 men lingered by the loading bay, plain clothes but standing with the posture of soldiers. Another patrolled the perimeter with a rifle slung over his chest. The light above the side door flickered, illuminating a steel padlock that gleamed like a fresh wound. Maya leaned forward, pointing at the side of the building. That's where they took her in. The door, under the light, Thomas lowered the binoculars. You're certain? I never forget, she said. He studied her face, saw the resolve burning in her eyes, and nodded. Then we go in quiet, fast. Ree pulled the SUV to a stop a quarter-mile away, concealed behind a stack of rusted containers. They slipped out into the night, moving on foot, shadows among shadows. At the rear of the warehouse, Ree found an old ventilation duct barely hanging to the wall. He pried it open, the screech of metal swallowed by the fog. One by one, they slid inside. The duct was narrow, air thick with rust and damp. Maya squirmed through easily, her small frame perfect for the crawl. Thomas followed, every movement deliberate, controlled, his heart pounding louder than the scrape of his boots. At the end of the duct, Ree deployed a fiber optic camera through the grate. He adjusted the lens, then whispered, 2 guards, one by the door, one watching a woman. Thomas froze, his chest tightened. Elena? Ree angled the camera. The image came into focus, a woman with cropped platinum blonde hair, tied to a chair, her head slumped forward. Thomas's breath caught. "It's her." "And the other one," Ree added grimly. "Left arm, prosthetic. It clicks when he moves it," Maya's whisper cut through the darkness. "That's him." The man who gave the order, Thomas, clenched his fists. The fog outside, the weight of the duct, the years of grief, they all vanished in the rush of determination that filled his chest. "We go in," he whispered. They dropped silently into the shadows of the warehouse. The air was sharp with the smell of salt and bleach. Crates towered like walls, creating a labyrinth of steel and splinters. The hum of electricity filled the space, faint but constant. Ree moved first, a ghost through the darkness. He slipped behind the guard at the door, his silencer coughing twice. The man collapsed without a sound. Thomas moved toward the center, his eyes locked on the woman tied to the chair. "Elena," he whispered as he reached her. He tore the tape from her mouth, her head lifted weakly, eyes flickering open. "Tom," she rasped. He caught her in his arms, pulling her close. "I've got you." "You're safe." But behind him, a metallic click echoed like a thunderclap. Thomas spun, shielding Elena. The man with the prosthetic arm stood in the shadows, gun raised, his face twisted with cold fury. The artificial limb glinted under the dim light, white plastic with black joints that whirred as he steadied the weapon. "You don't know what you're doing," the man growled. "I know exactly what I'm doing," Thomas said, his voice steady, his body coiled like a spring. The man sneered. "She had evidence." "Names. They paid me to erase it. She should have drowned. You should have let the sea finish the job." Thomas stepped forward. "Drop the weapon." The man's grin widened. "No, you drop first." Before Thomas could respond, a voice rang out from the shadows. "Drop it!" Maya stepped forward, holding a heavy flashlight in both hands like a weapon. Her face was fierce, fearless. The man scoffed. "You again? You're just a stupid kid." Her eyes narrowed. "Then why are you scared of me?" For the briefest second, his gaze faltered, and in that moment, Ree lunged from behind. He struck with brutal precision, disarming the man and driving him to the ground with a final blow. The prosthetic arm clattered against the concrete, its clicking joint still whining faintly as the man fell unconscious. Thomas pulled Elena to her feet, supporting her weight. She was weak, bruised, but alive. "You're safe now," he whispered. She coughed, her voice a broken whisper. "Not all of them are gone. Ashmont, it's just one part." Others are watching. Thomas's jaw tightened. "Then we'll find them." Maya held up the sketch she had drawn of Elena, folded carefully in her hoodie pocket. "Keep this," she told her. "It's better than any photo." Elena smiled faintly, tears brimming in her eyes. "Thank you, sweetheart." They carried her out through the vent, moving as quickly as they could. Outside, a black van waited. Ree's backup team. Medics pulled Elena inside, their hands already working over her bruises. As the van doors closed, Thomas clasped her hand tightly. "You're home now," he said. Her grip, though weak, pressed back. "We're not done, Tom." "Not yet." The van sped away, headlights cutting through the fog. Behind them, the warehouse loomed dark, its secrets burned into memory. Back at the Beckett estate, Elena lay in a private medical wing, monitors beeping steadily as she slept. Thomas sat beside her, his hand still locked around hers, unwilling to let go. He studied her face, pale, scarred, but alive. At the door, Maya hesitated, clutching the strap of her hoodie. Thomas motioned her in. Elena's eyes opened slowly, and when they landed on the girl, a smile ghosted across her lips. "The girl," she whispered. "Her name's Maya," Thomas said softly. Elena nodded weakly. "Thank you, Maya." "I saw you that night. You didn't look away." Maya's voice broke. I didn't know what to do. I was just a kid. You were brave, Elena whispered. Braver than most. Thomas felt something stir deep in his chest. The truth had come from a child society had ignored, a girl no one had listened to until now. And because of her, Elena was alive. Later, in the quiet of the study, Thomas spread the evidence across the desk. Ree leaned over his shoulder, scanning the documents. This isn't the end, Ree said. The black triangle won't vanish overnight. Thomas stared at the files, his jaw hard. Then we won't stop either. Maya stepped into the room, her voice firm. Then let's burn it all down. Thomas looked at her, then at the sleeping figure of his wife through the glass doors. The fight wasn't over. It was only beginning. But tonight, he had her back. And tonight, a girl the world had dismissed had become the spark that lit the fire. The chance for rescue had come, and against all odds, they had taken it. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and stay tuned, the next story might surprise you even more.